My brother didn't realize he was signing his own eviction notice the moment he texted me, "Don't bother showing up." That was December 20th, 3 days before Christmas. I was sitting in my apartment in Halifax, still in my work scrubs, halfway through a container of leftover buttered chicken, when my phone buzzed. The text was from my brother. Let's call him what he was to me in that moment. A stranger who happened to share my last name. He said the family Christmas gathering was already at capacity, that my sister-in-law had a specific vision for the holiday and I didn't fit the energy she was going for, that I should maybe do my own thing this year, that they'd circle back in the new year. I stared at that message for a long time, long enough that my butter chicken went cold. What my brother did not know, what nobody in my family seemed to want to acknowledge, even though it was right there in black and white on a legal document in a filing cabinet in my home office, was that the house where they were hosting Christmas dinner was mine. I had bought it. My name was on the title. My credit score had taken the hit when the mortgage was approved 5 years ago. Every property tax notice went to my email. The home insurance policy renewed every March, and the premium came out of my checking account. I was uninvited from a party being held in my own house. I want to be clear about something before I tell you the rest of this. I am not a dramatic person. I am a 32-year-old registered nurse who works 12-hour shifts at a hospital in Halifax. I pay my bills on time. I keep a spreadsheet for my savings goals. I do not pick fights. For most of my life, not picking fights was something my family relied on, heavily, and at my expense. Let me back up. My parents immigrated to Ontario from the Philippines in the early 90s. They worked hard, they saved carefully, and they built a decent life. But there were 4 of us kids, me, my older brother, my younger sister, and the youngest, another brother. And when the 2008 financial crisis hit, things got tight. My dad lost his job. My mom picked up extra shifts at the grocery store where she worked. I was 17. I started babysitting every weekend, tutoring kids from school, saving everything I could, not because anyone asked me to, just because I could see what was happening and I wanted to help. That habit of seeing a problem and quietly solving it became the template for my entire adult life within that family. I was the first one to finish university, nursing degree, fully funded by student loans that I paid off myself by the time I was 28. When I started working full-time, I sent money home every month. Not a huge amount, but consistent. $200 here, $300 there. When my younger sister needed braces, I helped with that. When the car broke down and my parents couldn't cover the repair, I covered it. When my older brother and his wife had their first baby and couldn't make rent one month, I sent an e-transfer that they said they'd pay back. They never did. None of this was discussed openly in my family. It was just understood. Tara helps. That's what Tara does. Tara is good with money. Tara will figure it out. 5 years ago, my parents told me they wanted to move. They'd been renting in Mississauga for years, and the landlord was selling the building. They were scared. My dad's health wasn't great. My mom was tired. They needed stability. My brother and his wife were already living with them in the rental, along with their 2 kids, and everyone was panicking. I looked at the numbers, I looked at my savings, I looked at mortgage rates, and then I did something that I now recognize as the most naive financial decision of my life. I bought them a house. Not a mansion. A solid semi-detached in Kitchener, 4 bedrooms, near a good bus route, with a yard for the grandkids. I put down $40,000, most of my savings, and I took on the mortgage. The understanding, the one we shook hands on and that I was foolish enough not to put in writing, was that my parents would live there rent-free, my brother's family could live there at a reduced rate, and eventually we would either transfer the title or set up some kind of formal arrangement. That formal arrangement never happened. What did happen was that my brother and his wife slowly took over. My parents, who are kind and conflict-averse people, deferred to them on everything. My sister-in-law redecorated. My brother started referring to it as our house at family gatherings. When I came to visit, which I did, 4 or 5 times a year, making the drive from Halifax, I slept in the spare room like a guest. My old bedroom had been turned into a home gym for my brother. I told myself it was fine. I told myself they needed the space more than I did. I told myself this was what family meant. And then, this past fall, things started to shift. My sister-in-law had been making comments for a while, little ones, about how I was always working and never around for family things, about how my brother was the one actually showing up, actually present, actually involved. At Thanksgiving, which I did attend, driving 8 hours round trip, she made a comment at the dinner table about how some people write checks and think that's substitutes for showing up. I laughed it off. I don't know why I laughed it off. I think I was just used to absorbing things. Then in November, I found out through my younger sister that there had been a family group chat I wasn't in. Not a side chat, the main family group chat. The one where they discussed Christmas plans, who was cooking what time everyone was arriving. I hadn't been added because, according to my sister-in-law, I always made things about logistics, and she wanted the planning to feel organic and joyful. I found this out on a Wednesday. By Friday, I'd been uninvited from Christmas entirely via that text from my brother. The house I owned, the mortgage I paid, the family I had been quietly bankrolling for the better part of a decade. I sat with it for about 24 hours. I cried, which I am not ashamed of. I called my best friend, who listened and then said very calmly, "Tara, you know what you have to do." I called my younger sister, who was horrified, and said she hadn't known it would go this far. I did not call my parents because I knew they would be caught in the middle and I wasn't ready to put that on them yet. And then I opened my laptop, pulled up the mortgage portal, and looked at the numbers. The mortgage was in my name. The utilities, hydro, gas, internet, home phone, all in my name, all set to autopay from my account. The home insurance, my name. The property tax, my name. I had been so focused on being the invisible support system that I had inadvertently retained all the legal leverage. They had excluded me from Christmas in a house that I could, legally and within my rights, as the owner and title holder, reclaim. I want to be clear that I did not make this decision in anger. I made it in something colder and more deliberate than anger. I thought about it for a week. I consulted a lawyer, a real estate lawyer here in Halifax, who confirmed my rights and walked me through the process. In Ontario, family members living in a property without a formal lease agreement have fewer protections than formal tenants. But there are still rules and timelines. I needed to do this correctly. My lawyer drafted a formal notice. Not a nasty letter, a legal document. It outlined my ownership, the absence of any formal tenancy agreement, the requirement for vacant possession, and a timeline of 60 days more than what was legally required, because I wanted to be fair even when they hadn't been. It went to my brother via registered mail on January 3rd. I know the exact moment my brother received it because he called me 23 minutes later. I didn't answer. He called 4 more times that afternoon. I let them all go to voicemail. The voicemails went from confused to frustrated to what I can only describe as theatrical panic. What is this document? Is this a joke? Tara, call me back. This is insane. You can't just... This is Mom and Dad's home, Tara. What are you doing? Do you understand what you're doing to this family right now? I understood exactly what I was doing to this family right now. I understood exactly what I was doing. For the first time in a long time, I understood very clearly what I was doing and why. I texted him that evening. I've retained legal counsel. Please direct further questions there. I hope the Christmas gathering was everything you envisioned. I will not pretend that didn't feel good. It did. But here's where the story gets more complicated, and I think it's important to tell this part too, because the comments section of my life deserved more nuance than my brother's voicemails were offering. About a week after the notice went out, my mom called me. Not in a panic, not to yell. She called in the early morning before my brother's household was awake, and she spoke quietly and carefully. She told me she had known things had been unfair to me. She told me she was sorry she hadn't spoken up sooner. She told me that she and my dad had talked and that they wanted to find a way through this that didn't mean losing me. I drove to Kitchener in February. My lawyer came with me. She's in Toronto and was able to meet me there. We sat at the kitchen table, the same kitchen table I had bought at IKEA and assembled myself, and we talked. What came out of that conversation was something I hadn't anticipated. My mom, quietly and without my brother knowing, had kept records. Receipts I had emailed her over the years, bank statements, a journal she kept of family events and who helped with what and when. She handed me a folder. She had been keeping it, she said, because she always believed that one day it would matter. It mattered. My brother arrived home mid-meeting. He walked in, saw my lawyer, saw the folder, and I watched the confidence drain out of his face in real time. He had assumed this was an emotional outburst, a bluff, a daughter and sister acting out because she felt left out. He had not assumed it was a documented, legally supported claim with a paper trail going back 5 years. His wife appeared in the doorway. She looked at the folder. She looked at me. She said, "This is not what we wanted." I looked back at her calmly and said, "I know. You wanted me to keep paying and keep quiet. That's not what I want." The 60-day notice stood, but what we negotiated at that kitchen table, with my lawyer present, was something more structured. My parents would be allowed to remain in the home under a formal life lease arrangement, a legal agreement that gave them the right to occupy the property for as long as they lived there, with no rent required. That was always what I had wanted for them. That had never changed. My brother and his wife, however, needed to find alternative housing within the 60-day window. They were also going to repay the money, the transfers, the rent subsidy, all of it, through a formal repayment agreement that my lawyer drafted, not immediately, over time, but in writing, with signatures. My brother resisted. He said it was unfair. He said I was punishing his children. I want to be honest, that part was hard. I love my niece and nephew. They had nothing to do with any of this. But they also needed parents who took responsibility for their own housing, and that was not something I could do for them. He signed. His wife signed. My parents signed the life lease. I drove back to Halifax that evening. The highway was icy in patches, and I had to take it slow. I ate a drive-through sandwich somewhere outside of Truro. I called my best friend and gave her the update, and she cheered loud enough that I had to hold the phone away from my ear. What I did not do in the months that followed was respond to any of my brother's attempts to renegotiate. He texted. He emailed. He had a mutual cousin reach out on his behalf. He sent a message through my younger sister, who passed it along reluctantly and then apologized for being the messenger. Each time, I replied the same way. The agreement is in place. I have nothing further to add. Here is what I have learned, and I tell you this not as a life coach or a motivational speaker, because I am neither of those things. I am a nurse who got too tired to keep being a bank. You can love people and still have a limit. You can want good things for your family and still not be willing to fund their contempt for you. There is a version of generosity that is genuine, and there is a version that is just fear, wearing a different coat. Fear of conflict, fear of being the difficult one, fear of losing people who were never really seeing you in the first place. For a long time, my generosity was the second kind. I was not giving freely. I was paying to stay in a room where I wasn't even on the guest list. I have not spoken to my brother since the agreement was signed. My parents and I talk every Sunday. They are renting a smaller place now. They chose to move on their own after everything settled. They said they wanted a fresh start too. My sister-in-law ended up taking a job in Alberta. My brother followed. The house in Kitchener is listed with a property management company. The rent covers the mortgage with enough left over to go toward the principal. The folder my mom gave me sits in my filing cabinet now, next to the mortgage documents. I'm not sure what I'll do with it. Maybe nothing. Maybe I just needed to know it existed, that someone had been paying attention, even when I thought no one was. That's the thing about invisible labor. Sometimes the only person who sees it is the one keeping quiet about it the longest. And sometimes, quietly, they keep the receipts. I still think about the folder my mom handed me across that kitchen table. Not the documents inside it. The fact that she had been keeping it at all. Quietly, for years, without telling anyone. She had watched everything and said nothing, and then when it mattered, She showed up with receipts. I think that is the most honest thing I have ever witnessed another person do. There is a cause and effect to everything, even when it is slow and invisible. My brother did not wake up one morning and decide to be the person he became. It happened in increments, the same way my silence happened in increments. Every time I sent the money without being asked, every time I absorbed the comment and laughed it off, every time I drove 8 hours to sleep in a spare room in my own house, I was teaching everyone around me what I would accept. That is not blame. That is just how it works. The patterns we allow become the patterns people rely on. What I had to learn, and I did not learn it easily, is that integrity is not just about how you treat other people. It is about whether you are honest about what is actually happening. For years, I told myself I was being generous, but I was not being generous. I was being afraid, and I was dressing it up as virtue. Real generosity comes from a place of choice. What I was doing came from a place of needing to be needed, of not knowing how to exist in that family without being useful. That is not the same thing, and pretending it is only delays the reckoning. The intelligence I am most proud of, if I can call it that, is not the spreadsheet or the mortgage or even knowing to call a lawyer. It is that I stopped lying to myself. I looked at what was actually in front of me, a family group chat I wasn't in, a text telling me not to come, a house in my name where I was an afterthought. I let myself see it clearly. That kind of clarity is hard to come by, especially when you love the people involved, but it is the only thing that moves you forward. And then there is the question of what you do with what you see. My mom kept that folder for years. She had the knowledge, and she sat with it, patiently waiting for the moment it would be of use. I think about that a lot. She did not act out of anger, and neither did I in the end. Anger would have made mistakes. What I had instead was a 60-day notice and a real estate lawyer and a very clear sense of what I was and was not willing to continue doing. That took something that does not have an easy name. A steadiness, a willingness to hold the line even when the people on the other side of it are people you grew up with. My brother signed the agreement, his wife signed, and life slowly reorganized itself into something more honest. I talk to my parents every Sunday. The house in Kitchener has tenants who pay market rent. I sleep well. Sometimes the most compassionate thing you can do for the people you love is stop protecting them from the consequences of how they've treated you. Not as punishment, just as truth.